8 minutes. That's all the water needs to climb the spillway and take a town with it. 12,000 lives, front porches, photo albums, dogs that wait by the back door. Would you trust all of that to a pilot who was grounded? Because she paused for 4 seconds. Cold air hums in the control room. Radios crackle. A map bleeds red. Out on the tarmac, a lonely A-10 waits like an old workhorse that still knows the trail home. Somewhere a hand shakes. Somewhere a prayer is whispered. Somewhere a decision is already forming. A coin spins on steel, scuffed edges, stamped letters, EAG 7326RW. It wobbles, it steadies, it keeps turning as if it refuses to fall. The sound is small, but it bites the silence. Chill, gasp, tighten. They say it's too late. The canyon is jammed with noise, the sky with doubt. But the desert remembers names other people forgot. And sometimes the road back to duty isn't a trumpet, it's a breath, a whisper, a step toward a cockpit. No one expected to open tonight. Only 8 minutes. A town asleep behind thin walls. A river that does not care who is brave. A woman who once chose people over praise and paid for it. If the siren calls again, who do you want in the seat? That night, America almost lost a dam and found a forgotten name. If this question touches you, stay with us. The truth unfolds in the next minute. The hangar smelled of old oil and scorched dust, the kind of scent that clung to steel long after the engines cooled. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing the rows of aircraft in a pale, relentless glow. Miriam Johnson, known once as Raven 7, stood alone at bay, 14 cloth in hand, rubbing a streak of grime from the dull gray nose of an A-10. Her fingers were stained dark with grease knuckles, rough from years of turning bolts, but her movements were steady, almost tender. To anyone watching, she looked like just another maintenance tech, one of the invisible hands that kept machines alive but never touched the sky. Her eyes, though, told a different story. Calm, watchful. The gaze of someone who had seen clouds from above and fire from below, someone who carried the sky even while walking the ground. Behind her, laughter bounced off metal walls. A group of younger pilots in crisp uniforms leaned against a tool chest. 4 seconds, one of them smirked. That's all it takes to write your name in history for the wrong reason. Grounded for hesitation, another added, shaking his head. Better to pull the trigger than blink. Their voices carried easily, sharp as rivets falling on concrete. They weren't whispering. They wanted her to hear. Miriam didn't answer. She kept wiping cloth, sliding across battered paint that had seen desert storms and mountain passes. The Hog wasn't pretty, never had been. It squatted under the lights, stubby wings, and scarred fuselage. Other aircraft drew crowds at air shows, sleek F-16s, Raptors gleaming under banners. The A-10 was different. It was a survivor machine for a survivor pilot. Her locker stood open a few feet away. Inside, taped to the door, was a photo of her father in faded uniform blues, grinning beside the open engine of another Hog 3 decades earlier. Beneath the photo, in neat block letters, written by his own hand, "Being right is worth more than being fast." She touched the edge of the paper each morning like a ritual, then pulled on her coveralls and went to work. Most days no one noticed. That was fine. Blending in was easier than answering the questions that came with her call sign. Easier than explaining what 4 seconds meant to her. To the world, she was a mechanic now, useful enough but invisible. Still in the quiet between engine tests, her ears picked up every note, the whine of hydraulic pumps, the hiss of coolant lines, the dry scrape of metal boots across the floor. Every sound reminded her she didn't belong entirely on the ground. Her palms itched at the memory of throttles. Her shoulders remembered the weight of a harness. The A-10 beneath her hand was not glamorous, but it was unbreakable. Designed to take punishment, to come home missing parts other planes needed to survive. She had trusted it once with her life, and it had carried her through storms of fire. She knew every bolt, every scar. In her mind, it was less a machine than an old warhorse, like a battered pickup truck that doesn't shine but never quits, even when newer models stall. She whispered under her breath, words lost under the hum of lights. Not a prayer, not a complaint, just a reminder to herself, still here, still ready. Why does someone with her skills remain in the shadows? Have you ever been pushed aside even when you still had value to give? The calm of the hangar cracked like glass. A klaxon wailed sharp and high, a sound that froze hands mid-motion. Mechanics dropped wrenches. Pilots halted mid-sentence. Overhead, the intercom voice carried clipped and urgent multiple hostiles detected. Armored convoy with electronic countermeasures. 8 minutes to Eagle Rock Dam. The operations map flared, crimson bleeding across the digital screen. Little icons marched like steel teeth through the narrow spine of the canyon. 4 armored carriers, 2 jammer trucks, light anti-air vehicles fanned around them. The line they traced pointed straight at the dam, and behind that dam lay a town of 12,000 souls still asleep in their houses. The first response was immediate. F-16 scrambled engines screaming awake. But in the command post, the AWACS operator's voice came hollow, almost strangled. Jammers are hot. Our Falcons are blind. They can't lace targets. They're too fast to stay low in the canyon. No shot window. The silence that followed was worse than the alarm. A silence of men and women doing the math. 8 minutes until the convoy reached the spillway. 8 minutes until concrete cracked water. Surged families drowned. Commander Briggs leaned over the console jaw, tight eyes locked on the screen. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words carried like a verdict. It's too late. No one argued. Heads bowed, hands flexed helplessly. Somewhere outside, turbines roared to life, but inside the control room, the air was thick with defeat. Then a young crew chief broke it. He turned from the hangar bay, voice rising above the hum, "Who's current on the hog?" The words hung there unanswered. Pilots looked at one another, faces pale, avoiding eye contact. The A-10 had been sitting in Bay 14 for years, more relic than weapon. No one had touched its controls in a long time. Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable, and yet somewhere in that silence, a shift began. Not in the logs, not in the flight rosters pinned to the wall, but in memory, in the place where call signs aren't erased by paperwork. A name was about to be spoken, not from paper, but from memory. The words landed like a hammer. You're off flight status. The duty officer didn't even raise his voice. He didn't need to. A simple statement, cold as a stamped form. For a moment, the command room seemed to shrink around Miriam. The air thickened and the silence afterward pressed heavier than the siren. She didn't argue, not yet. Her hand moved instinctively, fingers brushing the small coin in her pocket, the one marked EAG 726RW. Its edges were worn smooth, its weight familiar, as if it carried both her shame and her defiance. She closed her hand around it and breathed steady but shallow. And then the past cracked open. The cockpit had been blistering that day. Sunlight knifed across her visor. Sweat stung her eyes. Targets marked on the ground, a cluster of vehicles in hostile territory. Her finger rested on the trigger, the GAU-8 spinning hungry. She had clearance. The order was in her ear. Fire. Now. But she had seen it, movement on a rooftop. A laundry line, children's clothes fluttering in the heat. And then a figure, small, unmistakable. A child running across the roof. Her finger froze. 4 seconds. One breath. Then another. By the time the rooftop cleared, the window was gone. She pulled away, banking, hard, safe, but silent. The board later called it hesitation. Her squad called it weakness. No one wanted to hear her explanation that right had been worth more than fast. The memory bled into the present. The young pilot's voices still echoed in her ears. 4 seconds. Laughter that wasn't funny. Whispers that never stopped. She tightened her grip on the coin until it cut into her palm. That tiny sting was the only proof she still had, feeling left in her bones. She wanted to step forward to say she could fly the hog, that no one in this room knew the canyon like she did. But the weight of those 4 seconds pressed back. What if she climbed into the cockpit and froze again? What if this time her choice drowned 12,000 instead of saving one? Her chest ached with the memory of her father's voice, steady and unhurried. Being right is worth more than being fast. The mantra that had shaped her. The mantra that had cost her career. A cough from the crew pit pulled her back. All eyes were still on the screen, red icons crawling closer to the dam. No one looked at her. No one expected her to speak. And maybe they were right. Maybe she belonged here, oil under her nails cloth, in her hand, not in the seat of a warplane. But the hog sat waiting, old and scarred like her. And the desert outside did not care about her doubts. Was 4 seconds hesitation cowardice or combat morality? If you were in her place, would you have fired? The hangar door creaked and a shadow stretched across the concrete floor. Miriam looked up, and for a heartbeat she thought it was her father. Same heavy shoulders, same slow stride that carried more weight than any uniform could. But it wasn't him. It was Samuel Rhodes. Chief Rhodes had served beside her father decades ago, a USAF crew chief who had seen enough combat tours to make his hair turn white before its time. Now in his 70s, he moved with the steady patience of a man who no longer had to prove himself. His coveralls hung loose, his hands were lined and scarred, but his eyes were alive. Two coals banked, never cold. He didn't greet her with sympathy. He simply leaned against the wing strut of the hog, arms folded, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. "You're gripping that coin so tight," he finally said, voice low-weathered. "You'll rub the letters clean." Miriam released her fist. The coin glinted in her palm edges, biting faintly into her skin. Rhodes nodded toward the A-10, still the ugliest bird they ever built, and still the one I'd trust to carry me through hell. He ran a hand across the scarred fuselage. "People forget what it can do. But you don't." She shook her head. "I'm not on status. They don't want me up there." "That's paper talking," Rhodes said. "Paper doesn't fly. Pilots do." He straightened his voice, gaining the weight of command again. "3 things your dad drilled into us. Maybe you forgot, so I'll remind you." He raised one gnarled finger. "First, fly lower than the echo. The radar can't catch what the canyon walls already swallowed. Terrain is cover. You read the stone like you'd read scripture. Second finger. Keep the rhythm at 72. When fear climbs your spine, set your finger tapping. 72 beats a minute, like a resting heart. Keep your heart there, and your hands stay steady." He tapped his own thumb against the fuselage, slow, and even letting the rhythm echo through the hangar. Third finger. Glide like a whale's belly. If hydraulics go and they will, don't fight it like a fighter jet. Let the hog slide in. She was built to take it. Belly on the runway, sparks and all. She'll bring you home if you bring her trust. He paused, letting the words settle. Miriam felt them sink, the cadence of her father's voice hidden in them. Rhodes went on tone, almost like a teacher to a classroom of one. "You remember what ECM feels like static in your phone line. You hear the words but not the meaning. Jammer trucks throw that static into the sky, blind the falcons. But the hog doesn't need clean talk to get her work done." He pointed at the massive rotary cannon under the hog's nose. "That Avenger down there, GIU-8. It's like a sledgehammer writing with a needle. Pinpoint. Brutal. 2-second burst in armor, folds like cardboard." His hands shifted to the rails under the wing. "The Maverick missile, AGM-65. It's an eye that won't blink. Once it sees, it never forgets, not until it hits." Then his gaze flicked upward to the rafters. "And MANPADS, shoulder-fired missiles. Think fireworks chasing heat. They'll come hungry for your engines. Don't let them find a steady flame. Flares, evasion, rhythm." He finished by laying his palm flat against the hog's skin. "And if it comes to it, remember, belly landings aren't failures. They're like sliding on a whale's belly across the sea. Sparks fly, metal screams. But if you guide her straight, both of you live to tell it." The hangar fell quiet again. The only sound, the buzz of the fluorescence above, and the slow tap of Rhodes's finger, keeping the rhythm alive. "You only get one run, Raven," he said at last, his voice soft but immovable. "Don't waste it." Miriam looked at him, at the hog, at the coin still warm in her palm. Something in her chest shifted, not the erasure of doubt, but the return of memory. The hog rumbled beneath her as the throttles slid forward. Engines spooled deep and rough, vibrating through the frame like a drum beat in her chest. The runway blurred past in streaks of gray, then dropped away as the A-10 lifted heavy wings, biting into the twilight air. Miriam kept the climb shallow. Altitude was luxury she didn't have. The hog wasn't made to dance in open sky. It thrived where echoes lived, where stone walls closed in. Ahead lay Coyote Spine, past a canyon carved narrow and cruel, its ridges clawing at the sky. The wind there never blew steady. It twisted, snapped, tugged at wings like invisible hands trying to drag a pilot into the rock. Her father's voice lingered. "Fly lower than the echo." She eased the stick, dropping closer to the terrain, letting the canyon walls swallow her sound. The hog settled into its element, a predator crouching low instead of soaring high. The headset crackled, AWACS breaking through static. Convoy in sight. Lead jammer truck holding center. 30 seconds to strike window. She exhaled once slow and thumbed the weapon selector. The Maverick armed with a soft, eager tone, crosshairs sliding over the heat signature of the first ECM truck. "Eye that won't blink," she whispered. Tone lock. Steady. One squeeze and the missile leapt, free trailing smoke as it darted down the canyon's throat. A beat of silence. Then fire bloomed against the rock face. The lead jammer disintegrated, its electronic screams silenced in an instant. The hog shuddered slightly as the shockwave slapped her canopy, but the sky around her cleared lighter somehow. The canyon closed, tighter walls rushing past close enough to make her teeth clench. Sweat traced her temple, caught in the edge of her mask. Yet in that moment, as the echoes rolled away, she felt calm, steady as the rhythm at 72. Sometimes what's right isn't loud. Her grip tightened on the stick. She knew what came next. Because ECM number 2 wasn't sitting still. The canyon pinched tighter, a stone throat closing around a single breath. The first jammer burned behind her, its static torn from the sky, but the convoy ahead moved like one animal, horns down, armor overlapping, guns searching for an angle. Miriam trimmed a hair lower. Rocks skimmed under her wingtips. The hog rode the terrain like a riverbed, not a runway. The escorts sprang their trap. 2 light anti-air trucks broke formation on a ledge, above muzzles flashing tracers, stitching bright, crooked lines across her path. The canyon gave them a balcony and her a narrow aisle. She felt the tug in the stick, a tiny shiver, as rounds chewed the air, where she intended to fly next. She didn't yank. She carved. A nudge of rudder, a half roll along the wall. The Pipper walked onto the lead truck like a surgeon's lamp, finding a wound. Short burst. 1, 2. The Avenger wrote its signature sledgehammer precision needle punctuation. Armor peeled. Armor. Tires hopped. The truck pitched and vanished in a fan of dust and metal. She shifted a breath left, let the second escort overshoot its own lead, then tapped another 2-second note. The ledge coughed smoke and fell silent. A light flickered on the panel oil pressure, just a tick lower than it should be, a whisper instead of a shout. She felt it the way you feel weather changing in your knees. Not fatal, not yet. But the hog doesn't lie. She tapped the coin through her flight glove, then let her index finger find the rhythm Rhodes had given back to her. 72. Keep the heart there. Hands stay steady. The canyon kinked. The convoy tried to vanish behind a curve of basalt. She took the inside of the bend like a biker who knew the gravel from memory. Her RWR ticked a dry metronome under the 72, and then the warning climbed a note heat plume at 2 o'clock, low, sudden, and mean. MANPADS. A shoulder-fired missile lit off like a fistful of fireworks gone feral, homing on the hog's hot breath. She didn't curse. She didn't blink. Throttle eased, nose dipped. A pocket of cooler air hugged the riverbed. With her left thumb, she threw a handful of tiny suns over her shoulder. Flares bloomed and fell, bright bait for the missile's hungry eye. She cut a diagonal across the slot, not wide, just enough to make the heat trail wobble. The missile took the lie she gave it. It sliced past her right wingtip and exploded into the wall, a hot cough and a dirty echo. On the net, a voice she recognized but didn't place, muttered half off mic. "She's hesitating, isn't she?" Another answered. "We need shots, not stories." Their doubt rode the same air as her breath. For one heartbeat, the old stain came back, that cheap label glued to her name. She could feel it trying to seat itself to tell her what kind of pilot she was allowed to be. 72, she told her hands. Tap, tap, tap. The hog steadied under her palms like an animal feeling its rider's pulse. The second jammer truck flashed and her pod feed sleeker box antennas down, weaving from shadow to shadow. Smart driver, nervous gunner. It hugged the lee of a jutting fin of rock, forcing any straight-line shot to pass too close to the stone. She could force it and risk ricochet, or she could read the canyon the way Rhodes said, like scripture. She slid lower until the canyon itself became a map. Runnels shelves, a wind that tilted, then quit, then tilted again. Fly lower than the echo. She let the echo climb above her. Then she cut the corner. Not by distance, by time, entering a side seam, a slant of air that most pilots avoid because the wall feels like it's breathing at your canopy. She counted the breaths, one for entry, one for alignment, one for release. The truck's silhouette popped from behind the fin for a single beat. Not enough for a full-throated spray, enough for a surgeon's touch. 2 seconds. The Avenger's tone became a textured growl in her bones. Depleted uranium teeth chewed the jammer's spine. Antennas snapped like dry reeds. The box jolted, flared, and died. The canyon seemed to exhale. Radios cleared a fraction like someone had taken their thumb off the speaker. Pressure ticked again. The amber needle drooped and steadied. She adjusted mixture, babying the engine without nursing it. The hog is forgiving, but only to pilots who listen. She listened. The convoy reacted badly, good for her, dangerous for everyone else. Without the jammer's umbrella, they were naked under the sun, and panic is loud. 2 carriers tried to occupy the same thin lane and kissed fenders hard. A third lurched toward a side cut to regain spacing. That's when she realized it wasn't panic. It was choreography. They weren't braking, they were splitting. One element punched forward, trading protection for speed, sprinting toward the mouth of the pass, and beyond it, the dam's no-fire boundary. The other element throttled down and hugged the canyon wall's shadow, using the backscatter to smudge its shape, creeping toward a line of sight that would deny her a clean shot without a crazy bank. It was a good plan. It was also familiar. The kind of trick men pull when they believe the pilot is greedy for a single heroic target. She wasn't greedy. She was disciplined. There's a difference. She came off the forward element for half a breath, enough to mark their speed, their angle, the time they needed to reach the no-fire line. Then she slid her eyes and the hog together toward the shadow group. The wall there wasn't smooth. It wore a lip, a dark lip with a pocket of cooler air under it, the kind that steals lift from wings and gives concealment to steel. She bottom-trimmed, let the wingtip kiss the safe side of the pocket, and took a shot lane the width of a pickup tailgate. The escorts guarding the shadow group didn't expect a burst through that seam. She gave them one anyway, 2 seconds again, because 2 seconds is how you write your name without shouting. One escort flipped its hood, the other lurched into the rock and stuck like a beetle. Behind her ear, another radio voice, tighter, older, came back alive now that the sky had fewer lies in it. Raven, be advised, forward element, increasing speed. Estimated 2 minutes to perimeter. There it was. The number that pulls the stomach down. 2 minutes until the line where her gun goes silent, because concrete and civilians live beyond it. She wanted to take the sprinter first, everyone does, but the shadow team had a trick left, and leaving tricks alive behind you is how pilots get killed on the way home. She flattened her arc through the notch and let the hog's straight wings do what they were born for, hold stable in dirty air, while hands do careful work. The last of the shadow escorts tried to climb for a shot over her canopy, misread her speed, and stalled into his own dust. She didn't finish him. No time. Not cruel. Just busy. Back to the sprinters. They had found the canyon's one piece of straightaway and were using it like a runway of their own, noses down, engines, loud armor plates clattering. She eased higher for 2 seconds, just enough to see over a spur and find the line that would not bounce her into the wall. 72. Tap. Tap. The coin pressed a small circle into her glove. Raven confirmed forward target AWACS, said calmer now that the jammers were gone. Confirmed, she answered. But they'll try to disappear into no fire. Copy. Advise shots before boundary. No kidding. She didn't go to full auto heroics. She didn't have to. The hog's advantage is not speed. It's stubborn geometry, long gun, stable platform pilot who can keep hands soft when everything around her screams hard. She took the lead carrier's rear quarter in the sight and gave it an angled kiss of metal. Not enough to explode. Enough to limp. It wobbled, bled speed, and dragged the pair behind it into a mess of their own exhaust. Not the kill, but the choice that makes the kill possible later. Oil pressure twitched again, lower now. A tiny tremor in the stick, as if the hog were clearing its throat. She thought of Rhodes's third lesson not as dread, but as a plan shelved for later glide, like a whale's belly. Not yet, old girl. Not yet. The canyon bent once more, a dogleg left. Perfect for the convoy to try their last trick, vanish one vehicle into the wall shadow, while the other sprints the boundary and dares her to break the rules. As they set up the play, she heard the doubter on the radio again, softer this time, almost uncertain. She's taking too long to line it up. Miriam didn't answer. The canyon did. A column of hot air pushed up from the dogleg and kicked her wing a fraction. She rode the bump, not against it. You don't fight mountains. You learn their breath. The shadow vehicle slid into the pocket it wanted, certain it had found a blind. She cut across the dogleg on an oblique, took a tilted lane that put the gun off center by a palm's width, and let the burst ride the edge. 2 seconds, always 2. The shadow folded. The sprinting partner flinched at the sudden loss and corrected too hard. That correction cost seconds. Seconds she needed. She checked the perimeter line in her mind and on her map. The numbers matched. The window was narrow, but it was not closed. The hog felt heavier now, a little lazier in roll the way a loyal dog moves after a long day and still turns when you say its name. She stroked the throttle like a promise. One element rushed forward. The other had been erased into the canyon wall's dust. The no-fire zone sat ahead like a border painted on the air. Split convoy 1 racing the clock, 1 already gone. The pass had taken its toll, and the hog had started to whisper about it. Oil low, hydraulics not happy, but her pulse stayed where roads told it to live. 72. Steady. Cold head in hot stone. See how rhythm, 72, kept her head cold under fire. The canyon spat her into a narrow straightaway walls, flaring just wide enough to trick the eyes into thinking there was space. The radio ticked 2 minutes to perimeter. Repeat, 2 minutes to no fire. Her cockpit glowed with angry red. Hydraulic warning lights burned like coals on the panel. The stick in her hand had lost its spring sluggish heavy, as though she was trying to stir concrete with a wooden spoon. Every correction demanded more muscle. Every breath came shorter, tighter. Her gaze cut ahead. The last convoy element, the sprinter, thundered down the canyon floor, exhaust screaming as if daring her to follow. They were seconds away from the invisible line, the moment she would be legally gagged, forbidden to fire, forced to watch 12,000 lives vanish in a white roar of water. Her father's words came back sharp as they had the day she first heard them. Being right is worth more than being fast. But this wasn't a chalkboard lecture. It was flesh and concrete and water and the weight of a town sleeping behind thin walls. Her pulse stuttered. The coin pressed against her thigh pocket, warm from her body heat. 4 seconds. She could feel them again, those breaths, when she refused the trigger because of the child on the rooftop. That hesitation had saved one life, but cost her career. And now the canyon whispered, "Do you dare pause again?" Sweat crawled from her hairline, stung her eyes. She blinked it away, jaw clenched. She could fire now, force a burst hope it struck true before the convoy tipped over into no fire. But a rushed shot could ricochet, scatter, miss entirely. Firing too soon could be another brand burned into her name, reckless, desperate. Or she could hold a fraction longer, wait until the pipper kissed the target's flank. Wait for certainty. But one fraction too long, and she'd be pulling the trigger with her own hands, tied the convoy safely inside the zone. She would be remembered not as hesitant this time, but as too late. The stick fought her as she trimmed into position. Muscles in her forearm burned. Her knuckles whitened, slick with sweat. The hog trembled under stress, old bones groaning, a beast still willing to carry her, but asking for everything in return. She tapped once, steady rhythm, 72. Her finger beat time on the throttle. Her heart tried to race, but the tapping dragged it back down. Steady, calm, cold head in hot fire. Her breath fogged the inside of her mask for an instant, a small cloud that faded too quickly. The pipper wavered across the lead carrier, slid wide, pulled back. She adjusted again, muscles screaming against the stick. The hydraulics bled more pressure, red light pulsing as though mocking her. Voices on the net cut through the static. "She's lining up too long." Another, "We'll lose it if she waits." She closed her eyes for half a blink, felt the rhythm through her glove. Then she opened them, gaze like a blade. The canyon offered no kindness, only stone teeth, and the ticking of a clock louder than the engines. One misstep and history will brand her forever. The dam loomed in the distance, pale concrete gleaming through the canyon haze like the blade of an axe about to fall. Miriam's cockpit screamed with warnings, hydraulics bleeding out oil pressure, twitching low, every panel lit like a funeral pyre. The hog groaned around her, but its wings still held. The convoy sprinted ahead, engines howling, trying to cross the invisible boundary that would lock her trigger forever. Her pipper hovered, wavering over the lead vehicle. Too soon, and she risked a ricochet that could send hot metal spinning into the wrong place. Too late, and the convoy would vanish into safety, leaving her a spectator to catastrophe. Her hand trembled once, then stilled. She tapped her finger, 72 beats a minute. The rhythm of control, the rhythm roads had pressed back into her bones. Her breath slowed, matching the tapping. The pipper steadied. She fired. The GAU-8 coughed thunder. 7 barrels spun, vomiting uranium teeth into the canyon floor. The burst wasn't long, 2 seconds sharp and cruel. Enough. The lead carrier stuttered, armor folding like torn tin tracks, biting air before collapsing into the rock. The convoy behind swerved, formation fracturing. But danger doesn't end when one target falls. It shifts. From the corner of her canopy, heat signatures bloomed, another armored truck hugging the canyon's lip, waiting for her to overcommit. The hidden one. The one counting on her to chase glory and forget caution. She rolled hard, the hog straining against its own wounds. The nose dipped low, nearly scraping stone. Her harness bit her collarbone, pain spiking down her ribs. She didn't flinch. The Maverick, armed with a soft electronic chirp, its eye locking onto the armored silhouette half hidden by shadow. She whispered to herself, "The eye that won't blink. Release." The missile dropped, skimmed the canyon, then streaked forward, white smoke tail curling like chalk across slate. Impact bloomed, sudden, violent, final. The hidden truck vanished in a blossom of fire, the canyon walls flashing orange and black. But the canyon fought back. Tracer fire raked across her fuselage, red and green claws ripping the air. A missile screamed off the convoy's last escort, veering toward her heat trail. She threw the hog into a knife-edge bank flares, popping white-hot decoys tumbling into the dark. The missile lunged, found the brighter flame, and tore itself apart against the wall. Her cockpit shuddered with the aftershock. Warning lights strobed, crimson alarms layering into one long, merciless scream. A smell of burned oil seeped in, acrid, biting the back of her throat. She looked down at the console, left hydraulic pressure nearly gone, right engine coughing. The hog was dying by inches. Her eyes narrowed. "I won't let 4 seconds define my life." The words weren't shouted. They were carved. Quiet, iron hard, the vow of someone who had already paid in shame and refused to pay twice. She rolled level, dragged the pipper over the last surviving vehicle, still clawing forward. She didn't give it glory. She gave it judgment. Another short burst, 2 seconds of pure steel. The carrier split open, smoke boiling out as its ammunition cooked off. Silence then. The convoy was gone. The canyon floor littered with twisted steel fires, flickering like the ghosts of threats that had thought themselves invincible. Above her headset, a voice cracked through the SEAL recon team, their tone disbelieving, almost reverent. "Convoy neutralized. The dam is safe. Both threats eliminated. The town saved." The hog sagged under her body, battered wings heavy. Miriam let her hands rest for a heartbeat, fingers still on the console. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm at 72. Her chest rose, fell. Not triumph survival, not cheers breath. She stared through the canopy at the pale shape of the dam, still untouched, still standing. The sky above looked wider now, though nothing had changed. Sometimes victory isn't a roar. It's the quiet after the storm, the silence that means lives will go on. She tapped the rhythm one last time, the coin in her pocket pressing against her thigh, like a pulse that wasn't hers alone. The canyon was suddenly quiet. No more engines clawing, no more echoes of steel grinding rock. Just smoke curling up from shattered armor, drifting like incense toward a sky that had nearly been stolen. Miriam steadied her breathing, the tapping on the console slowing to match her heart. In the headset, a voice cut through, this time clear, free of static, no jamming to choke it. "Commander Briggs." His tone carried no mockery, only the weight of truth. "Good hit." 2 words, that was all, but they meant everything. Not just an acknowledgement of the shots fired, but an admission that she had done what no one else could. She glanced at the gun sight, still glowing faint green. The Avenger cooled, but not silenced. The GAU-8 was never about endless fire. It was about precision. 2-second bursts, not showy, not cinematic, but devastatingly efficient. Like a sledgehammer writing with a needle, one controlled line and armor folded like it had been paper all along. That was the Hog's genius, and hers too. But victory has a price. On her panel lights flared angry again. Hydraulic pressure dipping lower, the gauge slouching toward the red. She adjusted, felt the resistance heavy in the stick, as if the Hog herself were gasping. A thin smear of smoke trailed from the wing root, darker than the fire haze outside. She flicked to secondary displays, left fuel line leaking. The Hog was bleeding out mile by mile. She leaned back in her harnessed shoulders, aching, the coin pressing into her leg. She had won the fight, yes. Saved the dam, saved the town. But she wasn't out of the canyon yet, and the Hog wasn't promising her anything more than the chance to try. She touched the console with 2 fingers, a quiet gesture almost reverent. Stay with me, old girl, because reward wasn't medals or headlines. It was this moment, clear sky silence on the radio, and a commander conceding respect at last. The sword she seized was not vengeance, but the chance to finish what she started. The Hog staggered forward, engines still grumbling, wounded but alive. For now, hydraulics falling, fuel, bleeding time shrinking. The battle was won, but the road back had only just begun. The radio murmured a safe vector, but Miriam knew the numbers didn't add up. The Hog was bleeding too quickly, hydraulics sinking fuel, dripping away in a thin, traitorous line. If she tried the standard climb to egress Charlie, she would run out of breath before she reached open sky. There was only one choice left. The river notch cut. A scar of stone carved by centuries of floodwater, it was tighter than any simulator dared to model. But it was 3 minutes shorter, and right now 3 minutes was the only currency she had left. She banked toward it, the Hog shuddering in protest. The pass yawned open like a broken jaw, walls, jagged, shadows black, the kind of place where wind changed its mind every heartbeat. At first it was silence, just the whistle of thin air under her wings. Then her threat receiver chimed sharp and certain. A hot signature waited at the mouth of the cut. Mobile launcher. Whoever had placed it there knew the base maps as well as she did. They expected her desperation. They had built this trap just for her. Her eyes narrowed. Desperation didn't mean recklessness. She remembered Rhodes's voice. Don't fight fear, outthink it. Her left thumb armed flares. Instead of holding them, she punched them high, 6 suns, thrown skyward bright enough to paint false targets into every sensor within reach. At the same breath, she dropped the Hog low, so low, her landing gear warning screamed so low, her belly seemed to scrape the canyon floor. The launcher took the bait. A plume streaked toward the rising flares, chasing the phantom heat. Miriam rolled the Hog half a wing's width, from the wall nose dipping until the Pipper found the real threat crouched on its flatbed. She squeezed. The Avenger spoke in its needle-hammer tongue, a short burst precise. Armor shattered the launcher, flipping backward in a geyser of dust and flame. Shards rained into the notch, sparking brief fires that guttered in the canyon wind. The ambush silenced. The cut lay open. The Hog clawed forward, wounded but unbroken. Miriam's arms shook with the effort of keeping it level, every muscle in her back taut as wire. She could feel the aircraft tiring systems bleeding, the fight almost drained out of its bones. Her canopy caught the faint shimmer of the desert beyond, the promise of open air, the whisper of home. But she didn't smile. Not yet. Because surviving the canyon meant nothing if there wasn't enough runway left to land. But is there enough runway left to land? The desert opened, and the runway stretched ahead, long and silver under the late sun. Miriam's Hog limped toward it, both engines coughing, every panel screaming for mercy. Hydraulic pressure was gone, the landing gear levers useless. Foam trucks had already soaked the strip, white clouds swirling in the crosswind. Ghost 9, you're cleared. Runway foamed. Crosswind 211, 9 knots. 1 pass only. 1 pass is all I've got, she answered, voice flat. She cut the left engine, then the right. Silence pressed into the cockpit. The Hog became a glider, heavy and wounded, but still alive. She trimmed for shallow descent. The stick pulled like wet cement in her hands. The nose wanted to yaw into the wind, but she coaxed it straight, rudder tapping like a stubborn mule's reins. Sparks waited in her mind's eye, sparks that could mean survival or the last light she'd ever see. Then contact. The belly slammed onto the foam-soaked asphalt steel, shrieking against grit. Sparks fanned out in twin rivers, orange against the twilight. The hog skated forward, crosswind, biting the tail, twitching once, twice. Miriam held her breath, fists iron on the stick, coaxing, not commanding. The aircraft groaned but stayed true, sliding straight down the center line. The speed bled away yard by yard. Screech became grind, grind became hiss, and then stillness, silence. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Mechanics, pilots, medics, all frozen eyes fixed on the scorched hog resting in a halo of smoke. No cheer, no shout, just the fragile quiet of lives suspended waiting for proof. The canopy hissed open. Cool air rushed in. Miriam unstrapped and dropped onto the battered wing, boots meeting steel that was hot and scarred but intact. She placed one hand on the fuselage, a quiet thank you, then stepped down to the tarmac. The crowd exhaled as one. Applause didn't erupt, it trickled, grew, until even the cooks and clerks at the barricades found themselves clapping, not out of spectacle, but out of awe. Later inside the command post, the twist arrived. Intelligence officers laid out intercepted logs. The electronic leak hadn't come from SEAL Recon at all. It had been seeded by a civilian contractor at the dam itself, security staff on the payroll of an enemy front. The enemy had tried to pit allies against each other to make the hesitation look like betrayal. Briggs stood before the gathered staff, eyes scanning faces, then resting on Miriam. His voice was steady, stripped of irony. Those 4 seconds years ago, they weren't cowardice. They were combat morality. She chose right over easy, and today she proved it, saved us all. The room held still. Some lowered their eyes. Others simply stared, the weight of his words shifting something in the air. Miriam didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her hand brushed the coin in her pocket, EAG 726RW, the metal warm against her palm. No triumph, no parade, just calm acceptance, like a knot finally untied. She had been branded once by silence and rumor. Now she was written back into the story, not as the pilot who hesitated, but as the one who returned when no one else could. And as she walked out into the fading light, the hog battered but upright behind her, the base intercom crackled with a simple message. Ghost 9. Welcome home. The base settled into dusk lights glowing soft against the desert horizon. The hog had been towed away, battered but still whole, its scars steaming under the last of the foam. Miriam walked slowly across the tarmac, helmet dangling from her hand, shoulders heavy not with defeat, but with the weight of what she had carried through fire and stone. Chief Rhodes was waiting. The old crew chief stood by the hangar doors, back straight, despite the years' eyes steady on her. In his hand was the coin EHG 7326RW, the one she had clutched for strength, the one that had defined her silence and now her return. He didn't speak at first. He simply lifted the coin, brushed the fabric of her sleeve, and pinned it into place where a flight patch should have been. The gesture was small, almost ordinary, but it rang louder than any medal ceremony. It wasn't about machines or missions or even victories. It was about memory restored, about worth acknowledged. The crowd nearby watched in silence. No applause this time, no roar of voices. Just quiet respect, the kind that lasts longer than cheers. And then in the hush, the truth became clear. Heroism is not only measured in battles won or enemies destroyed. True heroism is the courage to face 2 wars at once, the war outside against enemies with guns and steel, and the war inside against doubt, prejudice, and the scars of being misunderstood. Miriam had fought both, and in doing so, she gave back something larger than victory. Discipline kept her alive. Compassion guided her trigger. Together, they saved not only 12,000 lives behind a dam, but also her own humanity. 4 seconds of hesitation once condemned her. Tonight, those same 4 seconds were revealed for what they truly were. 4 seconds of honor. 4 seconds of choosing life. 4 seconds that deserved remembrance, not ridicule. For the community watching, for veterans who know the ache of being sidelined, for elders who remember being told their time had passed, for anyone who has felt their worth questioned, the lesson is clear. Never let age, color, or gender write your value. Those labels are thin. The truth of who you are is written in choices in steady hands when the world expects you to falter. Rhodes' fingers lingered on the coin, pressing it firm into her sleeve. His voice was low, but it carried. Your father would have been proud, not because you fought, because you kept faith with yourself, with life. The words were not just for her. They were for every pair of eyes watching, for every heart that had ever asked if it still mattered, if it was still seen. And that is the gift Miriam brought back. Not just a dam still standing, not just a town still breathing. She brought back proof that mistakes can be redeemed, that silence can be broken, that what is dismissed as weakness may in truth be the strength that saves us all. We don't measure a pilot by rounds fired, but by lives kept alive. If this story reminds you of a 4 seconds moment in your own life, when you chose the harder right over the easier wrong, when you held your fire, when you stood your ground, share it below. We read them all, and together we honor not only the victories of steel and flame, but the victories of compassion, the victories that shape who we are.